Słychać mnie? The next panelist in the alphabetical order is Professor Jan Fross from the Charles University in Prague. Professor Fross is an entomologist who is dealing with very important and complicated relationships between the soil biota, mostly insects and microorganisms, and the relationships with plants, and also the functionality of soil biota and the connection with the ecosystem functioning, particular on disturbed sites, such like the post-mining sites after deep coal mining, but also brown coal mining open cast sites. Please welcome warmly Professor Fross, and thank you very much for joining us. And Professor Miguel A. He joined us and came to us from the University Alcalá de Henares in Spain. Professor Zavala is an outstanding teacher, being the supervisor of PhD students from Princeton University. But apart from that, he's also focused on research, mathematical and computational models regarding most important ecosystem functioning processes, such like adaptations, phenotypic plasticity, and also those factors who are responsible for stability of ecosystems and for the dynamic processes. Please welcome warmly Professor Miguel Zavala. And the panelists from our country allowed me to start. Professor Marta Pogrzeba from the Institute of Ecology of Industrial Areas. Professor Pogrzeba is mainly interested in soil remediation, remediation, phytoextraction, and phytostabilization. And lately, he's also involved in international and national projects related to obtaining energy crops, also from sites which are abundant in heavy metals. So working also with biofuels and renewable energy. Please welcome warmly Professor Pogrzeba. The next, our panelist who came to us from Poznań, thank you very much for this kind presence, is Professor Andrzej Jagodziński from the Institute of Dendrology, Polish Academy of Science in Kurnik. Professor Jagodziński is the head of the Institute of Dendrology and additionally also the leader of a very efficiently working research group in his institute. Of course, he's the author of many very valuable and internationally appreciated publications, and is the leader also of many international projects and national projects. And also from some time, he's working on post-mining sites, the brown coal open cast sites, but the last years also on deep mining coal sites in Silesia. Please welcome warmly Professor Jagodziński. Thank you for joining us. And last but not least, among our panelists, we have also Minister Piotr Pyzik. And I think that these panelists don't need any further presentation, so I think that we can start our today panel. So welcome warmly, Minister Pyzik. As probably part of you were present during the morning sessions, and you have been provided with many information about the importance of energy for our country, the safety of the energy sources, the economical aspects, but not so much was related to the environmental processes. However, the word environment was mentioned by few of the panelists. I think, is it okay now with it? Good, fantastic, fantastic. So I think that our task as environmentalists, as biologists, is now also to explain that all the aspects of energy material resources is influencing the environmental aspects. And this is very important for us to understand what are the relationships between the resource mining, mineral resource mining, including energy resource mining, and the environmental aspects in terms of hydrology, landscape conditions, and also vegetation creation and development. I would like to start our discussion asking one, I think, simple question. Because up to now, we know that for a very long time in our legislation, but also in the other European countries' legislation, there are laws regarding the environmental protection. But we also know that it's not quite successful. So the question is, maybe we should consider to use the results of the latest environmental research to implement into those environmental action in order to get better results and in order to try to understand how nature and natural processes responses to all those human action which are connected with the mineral resources and energy resources. If I can ask as a first Anne Wheeler, Dr. Anne Wheeler, to start and share her experience from England.
Dzień dobry. I think in the UK at the moment we are in a difficult situation with regard legislation with the environment, because when we were in the EU, our legislation was aligned to the EU legislation. But just recently, the government has said they will modify some of the legislation, but not such in a good way. But it's very interesting that the citizens of the UK are pushing back against the government to become more, they don't want to lessen the environmental legislation at all, and in fact have become much more proactive in what is called citizen science. So a lot of people have started to be trained just as volunteers to monitor the environment along with some of the regional bodies like the Environment Agency and the Forestry Commission in the UK to try and enhance our understanding of the environmental processes and how we can protect the environment. So I think it's not just in the rural places in the countryside, but also in the urban areas. And so people are becoming much more proactive in trying to protect the environment around them and trying to enhance the environment around them and the places that they live. So I think research in universities, in some of the government organisations and by the people themselves is really important for us to do a good role for our environment and what we pass on to our children.
if there would be possible, Professor Detmar, you are absolutely the most experienced person of all of us. If you can share your experience with the biggest project in Germany.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Maybe we start with a question between the relationship between legislation and scientific knowledge. It's always a dynamic process. And Germany is known as a country which has a lot of regulations, even more than others, even if we are a member of the European community. And so also, if we talk about the transformation of old industrial areas and all reclamation processes, we have a lot of rules. Sometimes the scientific process is very much faster, and we talk now today about natural solutions. That means at least to work together with nature, with natural processes, and try to give the nature the chance to do things by itself. And that changed quite a lot, because in the last century, a lot of money, a lot of resources had been invested in areas like, for example, the Ruhr region for the reclamation of, for example, mine spoil heaps. And the success was not very good. We spent a lot of money and we failed, because, for example, the greening was not very successful, at least, especially to the heat waves in the last 10 years and the dryness out of that. So we learned out of that, and now there is more flexibility to leave more chances for different approaches and also for experiments, to let nature go their own way. The problem by this is not the nature. Nature rules a lot of things. The problem is always the established organizations, the established process. So in the natural and in the former process, the recultivation or reclamation companies, mainly owned by the mine companies, earned money by this process. So if you change that, and if you make a smaller solution, which doesn't cost so much money, people lost their jobs, and companies lost their income. And that's a problem. That is the problem. And so you have to change, you have to really change this, society conditions about that, and you have to develop alternatives for these companies for new fields of action. I think that it's possible to do that, and I think there are a lot of chances in working with these natural solutions.
Thank you very much. When we can move now to the Mediterranean area, because we all know that water is always a big problem, and probably the Mediterranean scientist knows about this most.
Thank you, Gabriela. My Polish is not very good, so I will go in English. The water is a big issue. Going back to the original question. It's true that the European Union is not perfect, but at least in Spain, many good things that have happened to the environment has come from directives and European regulations. It's not that we have the capability maybe of getting to the same point, but I'm not sure we would have done it so fast, because we have many internal conflicts. Spain is a complex country with different regions, and there are now, for example, in Doñana, political conflicts among local agricultural users, etc. So the European Union it's been a guarantee of getting these regulations. Further than that, in the particular case of restoration of all abandoned mining land, that's been very interesting, because it's one of the few activities I know that the company actually is obligated to restore the land. And that has created many opportunities also for scientists. In our group, for example, we have collaborated with mining companies. And also we have had incentives from European Union, like in forms of the LIFE projects, for example. But this, I would like to think of this private investment from the companies as a seed money, as an investment. So something we can complement with LIFE projects and other sources. From a more general point of view also, The natural restoration law, the proposal that was passed by one vote a few months ago, is also an opportunity for launching very ambitious restoration programs in Europe. Of course, it has many ways to develop. We need to include the stakeholders. That will be the point tomorrow. But I'm optimistic that we're in the right track. Of course, there are many dangers. I'm very concerned, for example, about greenwashing, because the regulations on carbon balance, on carbon credits that we'll discuss tomorrow, it's appealing, but as you say, in the Mediterranean, for example, water can be more important than carbon. Sometimes we trade in carbon for water. So I'm more keen on a multifactorial, multi-ecosystem service perspective. But these carbon credits are an opportunity, but we need to tune a little bit the regulations so we go away from the greenwashing, because and again, this national restoration, this European restoration proposal can be an opportunity of doing some regional landscape planning at the whole European level with connectivity, resilience, because if we leave each company to compensate the carbon credits, just planting trees in general is not useful. You get wildfires, you don't need forest management. Well, and that's just a short vision.
Thank you very much. So come closer to our borders, Polish borders, and Professor Frost, do you mind to share your experience?
Yeah, okay, so concerning the legislation, inevitably, the legislation is always a slow process, and certainly we have many regulations in Europe as concern the mining, which is a good thing because it make companies accountable for the damage. And certainly, the mining causes tremendous damage to environment. And certainly, inevitably, the research is a little bit behind the legislation. And I think legislation is also derived from people's opinion. Because once we speak about, compensation for mining damage, the people usually like to choose highly technological solutions because they believe they have that in hand, although this might not be always true. And they want to have a fast improvement. Yeah, so many regulations, for example, focus on having closed canopy as soon as possible. But having closed canopy as soon as possible actually mean your trees might be over thin and the productivity might be lower in long run than if you reach closed canopy just a little bit later. And when we're speaking about a mining plant, the people usually see a damage. Again, so there's no doubt the environment was damaged. But at the same time, the mining sites bring some opportunities. And I think we should see more these opportunities. Just to, pick up once, our extensive review show that the post-mining land can store about 8 times more carbon than if we reforest arable land. Yeah? So if we assume we have 3% of ecologically degraded land over Europe, if we just use that potential in half of those, it will be the same as we stop farming and reforest half of our arable land in order to store carbon. We are not going to do that, certainly, because of food security and so on. I just want to demonstrate the potential which is there and which is highly unappreciated. And there is other potentials in nature, species protection. There's many species who lives on mining sites because those are depleted by nutrients, and or our landscape was actually oversupplied by nutrients. And there's many other specific reasons. So we should really more use opportunities, and we should more use these natural processes because this can offer long-term stability. Yeah, we don't want our ecosystem to be nice next year. I mean, we want that, but we also want them to be nice 50 years ago, 50 years after that, yeah? And that's important.
Pogrzeba, you are leading a lot of projects internationally and nationally. Do you please share your experience about the legislation and the latest knowledge in an ecosystem creating processes on those sites from the perspective of project management?
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I should tell a few words more because we are talking mainly about the mining areas, but we should remember that with mining areas there is also smelting activity connected, yes, because this coal was in the previous century used for the excavate the ores and also reuse the ores, yes, that's why this coal also, so mining activity also generate the smelting activity, and smelting activity in the previous century also give us not so good land like lead, cadmium, and or arsenic heaps. Yes, so that's why all these landscapes are connected. And in Silesia we have both. We have mining heaps and also the heavy metals heaps. So based on my knowledge, what is really important that our solution, because as Professor Woźniak told that my activity was connected only and is connected only with heavy metals and also this post-smelting activity. And based on my knowledge, it is really important to not only, let's say, check the amendments, the plans used in the control conditions, because in some cases we have the problem that in the real life, when you are going in situ demonstration, there is no the same conditions. Yes, we have different, not only the climatic conditions, but we have also changes in the ground, and it can also change everything dramatically. Yes, directly. That's why it's important to, and I said it all my workers, that if our proposed solution will be, let's say, and resolve the problem, and we will be successful on in situ demonstration, it is a success. Because only to show in the control conditions, there is not a way, yes? We should demonstrate the solution in situ. But what is also important, I agree with Professor from UK that that we have, even if the UK is not in EU, we have the same regulations, and the society also have the same thinking that they should take care about the environment. And every society did more every day to enhance this activity. But in some cases, especially in heavy metals, we have, for example, we don't have the regulation concerning bioavailability. And the problem is that the total concentration of heavy metals is higher, while for plants and for humans, the most important is this bioavailable fraction, yes? That's why this regulation, and there is also the question and also the comment to minister, that it will be not from this ministry, because there is the comment to the Minister of Environmental and Climate, but in Poland we really need the legislation establish which bioavailability is safe or not, yes, like in other EU country, because there are some cases, and we have also our experience, that we have really high heavy metal content, total heavy metal content, but very low bioavailability, which means that there is not danger for humans. But, for example, in arable land, when in the 60s we used pesticides, and, for example, cadmium was very, let's say, substance which were used for this pesticides production, contaminated arable lands, and we have very low total content, while bioavailability is very high, and all this cadmium are going to the feed and food. That's why the solution, and also find the solution for arable lands contaminated with this high bioavailability of heavy metals, is really important. And also there is not today the time for talking about it, but for Silesian farmers, we have the solution to use energy crops except feed and food to only save the agriculture here, yes, because there is no way to do it in another way.
Thank you very much. I'm not sure if the idea to ask for another regulation is good for us, but let's see, maybe it will help. Professor Jagodziński, if you could share your experience from the open cast brown coal heaps and also probably some preliminary results from the black coal mine heaps in Silesia.
Okay, thank you so much. Good afternoon. Yes, we have some experiences in Bełchatów. There is a huge spoil heap not far from Bełchatów brown coal mine. It's about 1,500 hectares of the land and 200 meters high. Many years ago, about 50 years ago, it was artificially planted by many different tree species, but mostly by monocultures. So we have the most dominated species are Scots pine and Norway spruce, birch on this side, but there are also some mixed stands. And about 10 years ago, we have started our research to check how different tree species may change the soil, the upper part of soil, and how they influence the biodiversity of the local biodiversity of every single stand. And talking about the regulations, 50 years ago it was very common to plant Scots pine and silver birch on such sites, but no one thought about planting mixed stands. So we have only 50 hectares maybe with this kind of mixture. And what we have found 30 years after establishment of the stands, we found that the species, the tree species used for creation the stand was the most important factor that changed the situation in the upper part of soil, the way how it was restored and the ratio of the restoration of the upper part of the soil. We have found many more mites and fungi in the stands that were built by many different tree species, also not native species. So we, after the analysis of the composition ratio, the production ratio, carbon capture, litter production, and the diversity of mites, soil mites, diversity of fungi, diversity of herb species, mosses and lichens, we found that the most important is to establish a mixed stance, not a single tree species stand. And I think that this regulation should be changed because in the rules in silviculture, we usually use two plant species which have the lowest needs for nutrients. And if we talk about such a spoil heap, the amount of nutrients is really pretty low. So it's better to plant many different species to create the most variable sites for many different species. And I think this is one of the most important change we should expect from our Ministry of Climate and Environment to improve the way how we create the ecosystem, if we have to create the ecosystem, of course. If not, if we would like to see how the nature works, it is not necessary to plant any single tree species in Poland in our conditions because it will do it by themselves.
So exactly, coming back from agriculture and from forestry to the spontaneous succession, what is your experience regarding the impact on spontaneous succession on biodiversity in general, not only plant diversity, but biodiversity, on the water retention and on carbon sequestration, or one of that. It's not necessary to get information about everything. Just start.
Thank you. All right, so technically, yeah, we have compared in different systems. We call it passive restoration or active restoration. Usually in the, also in Spain, there was a very extensive reforestation program. And we've learned in time that natural succession actually is a much more powerful tool of what we thought. But of course, it has some problems also. Mainly it's we call it recruitment limitation. If the population is already too fragmented, the propagules, the seed dispersal is a problem. Actually, we found differences among animal and wind dispersed species in terms of their sensitivity to fragmentation. In general, zoocourus species, species are dispersed by animals, are much more efficient in colonizing new habitats. However, if the trophic change is damaged because of the diversity of mammals, birds, etc., this slows down. We have some papers on that. So in summary, we think that nature passive restoration works sometimes, although we get what we call the colonization credit also. There's some experiences, some forests that are completely new, but still they haven't reached their species richness potential. And also active restoration, if it's smart, if you just find the critical mechanisms, you can activate the ecosystem function. That's very important, the concept. It's like an activation with a minimum set of, maybe a set of islands or hedgerows can reactivate the landscape connectivity. So probably I think mixed hybrids, a hybrid system is probably the best in general terms. In some places you may need, of course, active restoration, and in others passive restoration. But as a general rule, I would mention hybrid approximations.
Yes, and in terms of biodiversity, the natural solutions and natural succession has a much higher number of species than if you compare that to the conventional reclamation vegetation. In terms of water retention, I think more important than the question what kind of plants do you use or come by itself is the design of the heaps, if we talk of mine spoil heaps, that you can create a special design for the retention integration of rainwater lakes, for example. If you make this kind of a clever design, you can also use this water again for the plants, for example. That is possible. What we should not do any further, that was the traditional method in Germany, for example, in the Ruhr region, when for mine spoil heaps has been planted, they have been watered for a period of 10 years with drinking waters. So millions of cubic meters of drinking waters had been pumped on the artificial hills to water the vegetation. And after 10 years, this stopped, and the consequence was that around about 50% of the planted trees dried and died after this. So this is not a very sensible method. Okay.
I think in the UK we have one example which has been quoted on, but it's quite an old one from a spoil heap close to where I live, actually. In the 1990s, it was a spoil heap, a coal mine heap that was considered not valuable or worthwhile to be looked after in any way. So natural succession took place over a period of time. Nobody interfered with it, nobody managed it. But when they went back some years later to look at it, some ecologists, they found that quite a novel biodiverse ecosystem had developed on this very poor spoil land, and that over time some of the organic matter had started to accumulate within the spoil heaps, so the water retention on the spoil heaps had improved somewhat as well. And the only downside of it was, because it was considered valueless land, not important land, the local people didn't value it either. So they would mountain bike on it and not perhaps care about it too much. So I think it also showed that getting the local communities involved and understanding that some of the spoil heaps do provide these opportunities for enhancing the environment, but if we can involve the local communities so that they understand, because they're not managed, they're not worthless. It's quite important. So there are some good examples also in Germany from Jörg's experience, where these really important ecosystems develop without too much interference from ourselves, but also how important it is to engage with the local community so that they appreciate those areas as well.
Yeah, so maybe I will, there was quite a few words mentioned about diversity, and there's many studies supporting that there is usually more biodiversity, not always, but usually more biodiversity in sites which was left to succession or to these passive treatments. We do quite a lot of work comparing production, and production certainly is lower in the initial stages of development, but surprisingly enough, when we compare, 40 years old sites or older, then these successional sites often have comparable or higher productivity. I'm speaking particularly about forest stands than planted sites. Again, that might not be true everywhere, but in many cases they are comparable. And certainly there was mentioning this, quality for, recreation for local people. So my colleagues did some comparison of beauty in terms of they take many photographs and ask the people what they would choose for a walk as a kind of recreational activity. And interestingly, the recreational value of this reclaimed forest decrease as it gets older, because it gets more close, you cannot see through, but the recreational quality of the successional forest actually increase as it gets older. They was also interested that the successional forest on the pictures was more valued by people who was outside the mining area, like people who live in capital, they like that very much. But people in mining area, they already recognize that this is useless land, as was mentioned here before, and they have much lower attachment, much lower value for that particular land. So this again showed that the perception is really important. As concerned the water, I would completely agree that there's other parameters like texture of material, how you construct the dam. But if you have comparable conditions, our results show that the water storage is basically comparable in mature sites, not in this initial one. And it's also depends, the prospect of the natural succession actually depends on the site status. So for example, if you level the sites, which is commonly do in preparation for planting, you compact the sites, which make forest establishment much more difficult. The forest is established if you plant it, but if you rely on succession, then you might have a big problem to which forest establishment because of grass competition, because of soil compaction, limited tree growths, and so on.
Okay, also completely different case study and story, because as you know, maybe not all of you, but I'm representing Institute which operated under Ministry of Climate and Environment. And a few years ago, they asked me, please establish something to diminish the heat island in the cities, to create some, let's say, different models, how to diminish the climate or how to adapt the cities. And we successfully got the money from the Norway funds 3 years ago, and we proposed self-sustainable green model for city green infrastructure. And that model we built in IETU, in my institutes. We demonstrated based on the sea container. We create the green roof, green wall, and also the plants grow on the ground. But what is really important, that why we call it self-sustainable, because we collect the rain, and on the roof we establish the PV panels, so we have the electricity to give the power to pump the water. And you can see all these, let's say, features, so humidity, temperature, air temperature, ground temperature from the mobile, because there is the application. And it's really important because in that demonstration we use the plants taken from the nature, so from carcerols grasslands. That's why there is another model that we can enhance biodiversity based from the plants taken from the nature. So that's why such installation, there is also the proven that except that we leave the nature alone and they did a very good job, we can also enhance it, so this biodiversity ourselves, yes? So that's why it's really important. And the last sentence that we really need to remember that in 2020 the European Union established the biodiversity strategy, and each city should show in the 2030 that they enhance the biodiversity to 25%. So that's why it's really important to get this proven, yeah.
So we have some experiences in comparison, the natural succession and managed forests. When I was talking about Bełchatów brown coal mine and the forest ecosystems that were created 40 years ago, we have found many ancient plants, I mean about plants which are related with ancient forest. So it was really a surprise for us that 40 years after the establishment of forest stands, this is not a forest ecosystem in my opinion yet, but forest stands, we found many species which are very common in the open area, but also many species which are related with really old forests. Old forests, I mean about those forests which are present, forest ecosystems which are present in a single habitat for hundreds of years. So we found some mosses, for example, which are related with primal forest in Poland in such a newly created stands. But the question is, what is our aim? If we want to create a forest ecosystems or to change the landscape, we may establish a stand and wait for 30, maybe 40 years. For local people, the most important thing is to pick up mushrooms. So 10 years later, maybe 15 years later, they will be very happy that they have such a young stand of Scots pine or silver birch. But for us, I mean about the ecologists and biologists, foresters, the most important thing is to create the ecosystems which the most close to the nature ecosystem, to the natural ecosystem. So if we compare the succession and compare the managed forest, we need to remember that the number of species will change over time. So at the beginning of the ecosystem restoration, forest ecosystem restoration, the number of species might be very numerous on such a sites, because we will have many plants for arable lands, even if we have no soil seed bank. But 10 years later, when the canopy will be closed, there will be no light under the dense canopy. So in fact, we will have less number of herb species, but many mites, for example, and other animal species in the upper part of the soil. But 50, 60 years later, the situation will change. The stand will be pretty old, the gaps will create between the crowns. So in fact, the light conditions will be better for many species, and we will have more species which are really related with forest ecosystems. If we conduct such a situation for several decades, it's possible to create a forest ecosystem similar to close to nature, maybe not natural, but close to nature, or something like that.
So if we would like to try now to make a kind of schedule, what should be done considering the situation now in Silesia? Because in Europe you have kind of chronosequence. We can observe what happened in Germany, in Spain, partly also in UK, Czech Republic. So if we would try now to prepare a kind of schedule, what should you suggest would be best to follow based on your experience in Silesia, where we have still a lot of coal mine heaps, brown coal in the middle of Poland, and also lead zinc ore and lead zinc smelter sites, which altogether provide a lot of diversity of habitats, which is also kind of natural resource itself. So if you suggest such a schedule, what would be your proposal?
Yes, what we've done in the past for this type of approaches is to have a broad perspective on both spatial and temporal scales, which are interlinked, because succession, maybe, well, at least in Spain, there's a lot of spatial heterogeneity, even from south-facing slope to north-facing slopes. The succession recovery can be very different. So I would include a landscape. It's called the forest landscape restoration approach, that we've used it also in Mexico, although there also the tropical dynamics is very fast. I think it's very important to have this planning perspective, because then onto that you apply a cost-benefit approximation. You see, on a GIS in which you have environmental heterogeneity, you have nucleation processes where you already have potential seed sources. You integrate also stakeholders, because they maybe also on different restrictions. Maybe there's a species protected area you cannot touch there. Also proximity to villages for mushroom preference. So I'm very keen on that kind of, we call it, a forest landscape restoration approach of planning, some kind of planning in restoration. So and there are some different methodologies of cost, benefit, multi-criteria perspective, and so on.
So you suggest to start from mapping the situation, assessing the stand we have, and based on this, on the, let's say, natural resources or resources that we have obtained after the human transformation, and then decide about the economical, probably also value, and then the natural value.
Yes, sorry, maybe our situation is very different also because I work in restoration in general, not specifically in mining. Within my group, there's a specialist on mining, on mine restoration. So he would give you maybe a different perspective because he works more on specific cases. I'm proposing that in any case, have a broad perspective because resources are always limited. So this approach allows you to make priorities based on environmental, maybe erosion risk, soil protection, biodiversity. You establish priorities because the resources are always limited. But of course, you may have other kind of restrictions. Maybe you have money from a given company, which is the one in charge of some mine restoration, so you have to prioritize that. I don't know about that. But as far as we can, I'm keen on having this spatial planning and schedule based in space and time, so you allocate resources more efficiently.
Could you, based on your landscape architecture experience, tell us what you would suggest a situation that we have in Silesia?
I try. It's always difficult if you come from another country to give advice to the place where you're now. So first of all, I would think, develop your own way. Don't copy what has been successful in other places, because your situation here is special. even if it's an industrial region, and even if we have a dozen industrial regions in Europe. So look, what is the special situation here? And I don't mean that only in terms of ecology. Always think the cultural level and the ecological level together. So this landscape is homeland of people. These people have experiences here in this landscape. They work here. Maybe they have recreation purposes in this landscape. So what is the expectation of the people for the former landscape? Clear, it has to be sustainable. We say that always, but what does that mean? So what will be the function for the landscape in future, beside of forestry, beside of agriculture, beside of being a settlement place, beside of used for recreation? How can identity grow? And I think one very important element is to accept the industrial past, to keep some remnants of industry, to deal with industrial heritage, as you already do in some places, and to make this to identity elements. And also with the mine spoil heaps, don't look at them as dumps or garbage places. Look at them as origins of cultural and work activity over 100 years. So don't cover them, don't forget them, be active in produce them to new, maybe landmarks of a post-industrial society.
I think I agree with both what Miguel and Jörg have said, so it's hard to say something new and different. But from experience when we were looking at the water resource management in urban areas and working from an academic point of view and government point of view, it was interesting to work with local authorities, the regional government, because quite often we found that, say, the planning department and the environmental department or the ecologists didn't talk to each other either. So that they wouldn't really, they wouldn't always get together and sit around a table together, do some opportunity mapping, looking at the maps, thinking of what they wanted, what the people might want, what the environment might benefit from, but they didn't do it together. They had their own little silos of expertise and didn't learn from each other or come to some sort of consensus on how to approach things together. And so I would just say that maybe that's an opportunity to look at about how the local authorities interact with all of this restoration of urban areas.
Yeah, so this was really difficult because most of the thoughts was already presented. So maybe I will just try to wrap them some way and maybe add something new. So basically, definitely, as I say in my previous mentioning, so looking for opportunities is really important. This kind of out-of-box thinking and multi, facet view, which can put different perspective, it's also important and can help a lot. Another, I think, aspect which wasn't mentioned here so far was if that's the active mining, then if we know what we want from post-mining landscape, we can help to create that during mining operation much more efficiently than if we just mine efficiently and then we try to do the restoration. Yeah, because for many, for example, if you generate the mining lakes, if you have shallow slopes, you would have waves energy absorbed by shallow bottom, and you will have no abrasion on the shoreline, which would otherwise ruin your lake and so on. I don't want to go to technical details, but there's many things you can do during mining operation when you move you know, thousands of tons material anyway, so you can just diversify this little bit and create much more better precondition for future use of the landscape if you know what you expect. So that would be probably, yeah, I think most of the other things was already mentioned.
Yes, but I agree with the colleague from Germany that in Poland we should create our own way, definitely. Only the good examples in Europe should be only to show that it is possible, but based on our experience and based on the funds, because it's really important, we should create our knowledge. But the voice from here, as you know, and probably you also visited Silesia, that there is no borders between the cities. So we have really big agglomeration. That's why, in our case, it is really important to recognize and also restore very smart greenery in each city and restore them based on the native plant species. Yes, it's really important. And also remember that based on this, let's say, industry here from the last century, we can have here the contamination. So that's why the solution proposed should take this, let's say, knowledge to resolve the problem, but also the last thing, give all this greenery to society, because the people waiting for that.
Thank you. And then, in my opinion, ecology, society, and economy should be taken into account together to create the way how the post-industrial sites should be adapted to our needs, because we have our needs and we have to solve our expectations. And the region, I mean about the Silesia, has its own history, and the history should be remembered by the people and should be presented to other people that came here to visit the place. I have to tell that I am for the first time in Gliwice. And I am more than 40 years old. So this is my first time here, and I am really satisfied with the place I have seen yesterday. Many trees along the roads. I haven't seen many places, so maybe my thoughts are not very close to the place I have seen in other places, but I think it is a really nice city and very green. I think that this region has, as I have mentioned, has its own history, and it is important to protect the memories here and achievements of people that lived here in the past, because this is a part of our nationality, yes, and our heritage. And at the end, I think that we should use the potential of this region as a treasure. To remember that this is a treasure, even if sometimes it is not pretty as a gold. Okay. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure if I will be objective, but as I have mentioned, I am first time in Gliwice, but in Katowice I was for several times, and I have seen many nice places to visit, and I have shown many of them to my young daughter, and she was really satisfied with the places she seen in our trip here. I have prepared some notes during the conversation. I'm not sure if they will be in line with all of the comments, but I think that understanding novel ecosystems, functions, and identification of novel habitats is necessary in the Anthropocene era. And novel ecosystems in the urban industrial landscape are particularly interesting aspects of environmental knowledge, and it requires broadening by scientists with from different disciplines. The natural processes taking place in the development of natural habitats, novel habitats, and novel ecosystems still need to be studied and understood by people which are interested in different part of our knowledge and different part of science. Additional research is necessary, in my opinion, to identify the adaptation processes and mechanisms that have evolved as a response to the changes in the biotic and abiotic conditions in such an environment which was transformed by the human activity. It needs to be highlighted that interdisciplinary studies should be conducted towards the goal of enhancing the natural processes in such places. And that is why we need the knowledge of biologists, foresters, people related with social science, for example, psychologists, and so on and so on. And we should link ecosystem ecology, social and economic values of such places. The important and very up-to-date question is how the urban and industrial habitats create ecosystem services and how they respond to ecosystem services and our needs. When discussing ecosystem services, it is important to consider natural capital as the key provider of natural processes and natural assets from which ecosystem services are derived. It is worth to mention, in my opinion, that ecosystem services are defined as the conditions and processes through which natural ecosystems and the species that create them up sustain and fulfill our our life. At the end, I think that the politicians, business managers, and decision makers are increasingly aware of the need for the sustainable management of such a natural capital like in Silesia. And the contemporary task for scientists, so for us, mainly for us, is to provide the managers and stakeholders, if it is possible, of course, with the manageable protocols to help them how to understand the very complex links and relationships between different parts of ecosystems and how they function. Our research has shown that one management strategy will not work across all spatial, temporal, and cultural situation. I think that it would be very useful to employ integrated natural and human models to understand the dynamics of ecosystems that were created in such places, including biodiversity and various trophic levels to stimulate management scenarios in relation to biodiversity and ecosystem services. I have mentioned the ecosystem services many times, but I think this is really important, and we have only we have addressed this not in many places. We should better understand the role of biodiversity and human transformed ecosystems, and should explore which management policy provides the greatest impact on sustainable ecological, social, and economic aspects. It is a very important task, not only for scientists, in my opinion, but also for politicians and local society. And at the end, I think that the requirement of greater collaboration between scientists and policy decision makers, and the managers and practitioners should focus on understanding how the processes and functional parameters of novel ecosystems work. This is also a huge knowledge for us, and we have many gaps, even if we work to understand the ecosystem services and the way how novel ecosystems function for many years. This knowledge will provide the basis for how novel ecosystems should be supported, and further research has to be conducted to find out how to protect specific vegetation and other organisms, because on many places we have habitats where we may find many species which are really very rare, endangered, because we have created the habitats which are not very common in ecosystems or as a whole. And we should remember that the amount of nitrogen and phosphorus emitted to the atmosphere is very huge for the last 80 years. For the last 80 years, so in fact we have changed the soil dramatically. I mean about the trophic level, and many plants, animals, and fungi species has lost their habitats to survive. So I think this is one of really the most important thing to to protect such a places for economical values, of course, but I mean about society and biodiversity, so about the nature. And the question is how we would like to re-establish the ecosystems, and if you are really the best part of the ecosystem, to decide how it should look like in the future. I think nature is much better than we are. Thank you.
Czy ja mam tam pójść? Dobra. No, second time. Sorry. Oh, thank you very much. Wow. Wow. It was interesting discussion, but biological diversity is not my favorite science, so I will, if you, no, I will start in Polish, the rest of these things. The first I would say, no, pierwsze co chciałem powiedzieć to jest kwestia taka, że jeśli chodzi o legislację. Halo, halo, nie wiem czy mnie słychać? Nie, mikrofon. Aha, dobrze. Pierwszą rzecz, na którą chciałbym zwrócić uwagę, to są kwestie legislacyjne. Surowce zawsze pociągały człowieka i są jego historią, teraźniejszością i przyszłością. To jest jedna kwestia. Druga kwestia to jest to, że w zależności od cywilizacji, w której przestrzeni wydobycie surowców się odbywa, mamy do czynienia z taką czy inną kulturą organizacyjną tego wydobycia. Konsekwencje tego to są konsekwencje nie tylko dla ludzi, ale dla środowiska, co w dzisiejszej dyskusji było bardzo, ale to bardzo wyraźnie przedstawione. Ja dodam tylko jeszcze jedną rzecz, bo z panią profesor się znamy i nie jest to pierwszy nasz wspólny panel, stąd tutaj wiele rzeczy może być uznanych za wspólne albo bardzo podobnych, ale ja się tego nie wstydzę, wręcz odwrotnie, jestem z tego dumny. Cóż. Szanowni Państwo, musimy patrzeć na to wszystko, co jest związane z bioróżnorodnością, też w aspekcie pewnego celu i celowości naszych działań. Co to oznacza? To oznacza, że oczywiście ta bioróżnorodność musi nastąpić i jest zwykłą, moim zdaniem, konsekwencją porzucenia przez człowieka pewnej przestrzeni, dlatego że natura nie zna próżni i zawsze ją wykorzystuje i zawsze to robi, jakoś dziwnie się okazuje, w jedynym właściwym i dobrym kierunku i dla przyrody, dla natury, jak i dla człowieka. I tak nie chcę wyciągać wniosku takiego, że gdzie człowiek wsadzi łapy, to się coś złego dzieje, ale niestety taka jest nasza natura, że chcemy żyć, że chcemy się rozwijać, a jedyne źródło, jakie dzisiaj widzimy tej mocy, to jest szukanie alternatywnych źródeł energii, co się przekłada na temat naszej dzisiejszej dyskusji. Dlatego, że tak samo jak na Śląsku, tak samo jak kiedyś w Zagłębiu Rury, w Wielkiej Brytanii, miały miejsce sytuacje, w której kraje te wycofywały się z eksploatacji w przestrzeni węgla kamiennego, ale nie tylko. Nasz miks energetyczny, jak Państwo pewnie wiecie, 72% to jest węgiel i brunatny, i kamienny. Jakoś dziwnie połowa tych 72% to jest węgiel kamienny, a druga połowa węgiel brunatny. Szanowni Państwo, bioróżnorodność, która powstanie po zagładzie człowieka, też będzie ciekawym rezultatem. Póki co my musimy pracować nad tym, żeby to, co mamy, uratować dla następnych pokoleń, bo to jest nasz obowiązek. To jest nasz obowiązek. Żeby to zrobić, musimy wszystko planować, łącznie z tym, co się dzisiaj nazywa dekarbonizacją, czyli wyłączaniem z produkcji jednostek produkcyjnych. Mówię tu oczywiście o kopalniach. Nie, proszę Państwa, kopalni nie wyłączymy, wyłączając przełącznik. Tak tego nie zrobimy. Zrobimy to inaczej. Zrobimy to w odpowiednim czasie, w odpowiednim momencie, ale przestrzegając pewnych reguł dotyczących przede wszystkim człowieka, bo człowiek ma być beneficjentem tych zmian, i natury, dlatego że to są dwie kwestie, które są impodrabilne, jeśli chodzi o proces transformacji, jeśli Państwo chyba ze mną zgodzicie. Natomiast jeśli chodzi o, bardzo zainteresowała mnie kwestia bioróżnorodności, dlatego że w tej przestrzeni typologia, a właściwie umiejętność, no, pewnego rodzaju inwentaryzacja jest niezbędna, zarówno geograficzna, jak i no, biologiczna. Bo w tym momencie wiemy, o czym wiemy, w którą stronę idziemy, bo proszę zwrócić uwagę, wiele tutaj mówiono dzisiaj o użyciu wody w przestrzeni no, tej postindustrialnej, ale proszę zwrócić uwagę, że mamy na Śląsku nierozwiązany problem rzek, które są niczym innym, tylko strefami polisaporobowymi. Proszę mi poprawić, jeżeli się mylę. Dopiero po pewnym czasie biegu tego cieku dochodzi do takiego rozrzedzenia trucizn, że bakterie anaerobowe mogą się wziąć tutaj do roboty i coś z tym zrobić. Nie, proszę Państwa, my nie mamy do czynienia tylko i wyłącznie z jakąś dziurą po kopalni, nie mamy do czynienia tylko z jakąś strefą, którą dany gatunek mniejszy bardziej intensywnie zarasta, tylko mamy do czynienia z całą przestrzenią. Mówimy o całym Śląsku, który w perspektywie jakichś 20 lat, a może więcej, stanie się strefą no, prawdopodobnie zdekarbonizowaną, a co za tym idzie, tradycja i zwyczaj górniczy przejdą do legendy. Będzie można je oglądać albo na filmach, albo w muzeum. To jest kwestia pewnej zmiany mentalnościowej. To jest kwestia takich zmian, które no, przyniosą pewne konsekwencje. Jeżeli podołamy tym działaniom, jeżeli połączymy wszystkie te jednostki, o których mówimy, to w tym momencie jesteśmy w stanie osiągnąć pewien sukces. Ale szanowni Państwo, to wymaga koordynacji działań nie tylko biologów, nie tylko osób zajmujących się socjologią, tą gospodarczo-społeczną powiedzmy, ale wszystkich aktywnych jednostek, no, wszystkich aktywnych aktorów. Mam tu na myśli nie tylko osoby indywidualne, ale oczywiście związki i grupy społeczne, które razem synchronizują ten proces. I mam nadzieję, że w naszym kraju ta synchronizacja nie nastąpi dzięki sztucznej inteligencji, tylko naszej inteligencji, bo jeżeli my tego nie zrobimy, to sztuczna inteligencja to zrobi troszeczkę inaczej. Takie jest moje zdanie. I tak bardzo szeroko tyle. Natomiast no, tu z panią profesor pozwoliliśmy sobie na drobny żart, jak pani zadała to ostatnie pytanie panu profesorowi, mianowicie, że pewne rzeczy można zmieniać, jeżeli się wygra, najpierw trzeba wygrać wybory, a potem można kreować pewne kierunki niejako. Moja formacja nie jest jakby w pewnym sensie jednolita, znaczy w tym sensie, że jedni są za bardziej ekologiczni, drudzy mniej ekologiczni, co piątka dla zwierząt na przykład pokazała, ale szanowni Państwo, nie chcę, broń Boże, tutaj wsadzać polityki w nasze spotkanie. Chciałbym powiedzieć tylko tyle, że jeżeli razem nie będziemy pewnych rzeczy robili, to zrobi to ktoś za nas inny i niekoniecznie będzie to sztuczna inteligencja. I tyle. Dziękuję pani profesor w ogóle za zaproszenie. Dziękuję bardzo.
Dziękuję bardzo. Dziękuję pięknie za to ostatnie podsumowanie. Może tak z obowiązku biologa i badacza środowiska ważne byłoby może, żeby podkreślić, mamy tu dużo młodych ludzi na sali, żeby tutaj nie wprowadzać też w błąd, mianowicie musimy okay, whatever you prefer, no problem. Thank you very much for the last words. Maybe there are two important things to comment on the ministry words. The first thing is the rules of nature are not dependent on the, let's say, political attitude to them. They will run regardless of the votes. And the other very important thing, because there are many young people on the okay, we can continue the discussion later. But because there are many young people in the audience, I think it's very important that we as biologists and environmentalists underline that the term decarbonization is very unfortunate because it's not defined it's used by media and by people probably little bit unconscious. The carbon cycle is the basis of life on our planet. Without carbon, no life would sustain. Only plants are able to capture carbon dioxide into the tissue and produce biomass. So we have to be, as biologists and environmentalists, have to be very careful using this word not to misleading the information to the young people and be aware of the role of carbon dioxide in our planet. Thank you very much. Dziękuję pięknie. Jeszcze komentarz, bardzo proszę.
I'm older than Mr. Professor, so my opinion is a little bit different, especially around politics. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So we agree that we are disagree. Very good conclusion. So I would like again to thank you very much, all of you. In the first place, our panelists, particular for the effort that they came from around Europe to meet us and to share the experience with us. And I hope they will be also possible tomorrow during our workshop. And I would like very much to all the people in the audience, the young people, our students, and also all those who are interested in the environmental issue and the future of our little country, our Silesia, hoping that the heritage and the environment will be able to survive together and the country, the region will develop fruitfully in the future. Thank you very much.